morning, everybody. How are you doing today? It's very nice to have you here. And today I wanted to speak a little more about our upcoming program that begins this Sunday, Trust and Surrender, for living in the world and for awakening. You know, it's such a powerful theme, trust and surrender. You know, words that are oftentimes not easy. And there's also a lot of misunderstanding about this. You know, what trust means. What does surrender mean? And we will be speaking more and clarifying all that. But most of all, I really want to keep looking with you at the actual experience of it. What is a moment of trust? How do we come to fully trust? How do we come to overcome what we have believed and learned and acquired in the past in terms of trust? And, you know, a moment of trust really leads to a full moment of surrender, and vice versa. A moment of surrender really leads to moments or the ultimate moment of trust. So we want to really explore this experientially. And, you know, one of the aspects of what I want to be speaking about is when in our practice, on the spiritual search, when we find that we are not quite making the progress that we would like. You know, and even speaking about progress, it's a sensitive thing because it's a very subjective thing also. You know, what is progress to the mind is something very different than the actual progress, which is really our ability to be here, our capacity to be here. And so if we are not making progress in that, not in the mental sense, you know, not in what we think and imagine should be happening, but if we are not making progress in this sense of growing our capacity to be here, you know, I would say that there are two areas that we need to look at. One of them is really relying on the direct experience of presence. You know, so much of the time, even for many of us who have been doing this for a long time, presence can become something, you know, a thing that we go to, that we remember, and when I say go to, I don't mean the direct experience of presence, but some idea of presence. You know, what it's supposed to feel like, what it is supposed to be like, what is it that we remember presence to be. And so, you know, that really makes a huge difference. And that's why I want to say over and over and over and over and over again, we want to rely on the direct experience of presence. So even right now, as we are speaking, as you are listening to this, you know, we can both absorb the information mentally, right? So that's good, that's okay. You know, it's a good beginning. And yet, and this is the moment that I want to invite you right now, you know, yet we can also just rest into our natural state. Good, beautiful, beautiful. And you know, the more time we spend like that, the more time we actually, because that's really, you know, fundamentally the understanding of surrender, right? That's fundamentally the description of surrender is the mind merging in the heart. Heart, capital letter heart, our true nature. The moment when we actually know presence directly, right? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So the more we can spend time like that, you know, that really is what makes a difference. And don't really buy into the stories of the mind of what you should and could and where you should be, on what things should be happening. And we need to put all of that aside. That's part of surrender also. We need to put all of that aside and just be willing to be here, in this moment, right? That's all we have, right? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So that's the one part of what is necessary, right? And the other part is the capacity of our nervous system to be here. We can talk about trust and surrender, but if we can't really actually embody it, if we can't experience it, if our nervous systems don't know what that is like in a moment, that's going to be really challenging. And even if we have moments when we can give ourselves to presence, right? There still will be something that pulls us out, and I remember in my own experience, before the actual awakening, there were at least 2 or 3 times when the awakening started to happen, and yet there was not enough trust. And what that means is that, before everything could really disappear, there will be something that would pull my attention away from that. There will be something that would still pull my attention into the identification with the body, because there was simply not enough trust yet. Was really, that trust was not experienced yet. It was not an experience. And so, that's why I'm saying, it's so important not just keep coming back to direct experience, but the capacity of our nervous system to be here so that we can know experientially what is it like in a moment, what is it like in a moment to, regardless of what is present, to allow whatever is here just to be here. And so often when I speak with you in programs or in our private sessions, I can see that these the parts of your experience where there simply isn't enough trust. And when I say that, I don't, of course, mean it with judgment. I mean it simply, as a fact, based on your past experience. Whatever you think, believe, have experienced before is still stronger than your ability to be here. And that's why I want to keep encouraging you, and I do encourage you, and I want to keep encouraging you to keep coming back to the actual capacity, to the actual moment of being present, and to the actual allowing of what is. So we can counteract that momentum of the mind, right? Or we can counteract that momentum because in the past, it was not okay for whatever reasons. It was not okay to be here. That was in the past. And now, as you are allowing yourself to experience what is, you are actually experiencing the okayness of that. You are knowing in those moments that regardless of your past, regardless of what the mind tells you, regardless of what everybody else believes, you can actually be here. And in these moments, the okayness of everything as is. Let's just take another moment to notice that. Beautiful, beautiful. And when we can trust, we can follow what arises truly within your heart, that trust eventually leads to awakening. So I want to invite you to join me in this program. If you are new to us, you can come for free for the first week. We also have a special price for you for all 3 weeks. And really, everybody is welcome. So if there are any challenges on that level, just email us, check in with us. But I want to invite everybody, come and join me in this exploration, in this sitting together in the direct experience of presence and in the growing of your capacity to be here. I am very much looking forward to this.